When we look, as we said, at the basic foundation of the Islamic legal system, we can say it is based on Quran and Sunnah on one hand, and it's based on human understanding on the other hand. These are combined. And what is important for us to deduce or to take from this difference is the da'wah point, that when non-Muslims raise the question, how in the world can you Muslims dare to suggest that you want to rule your lives and the lives of your countries by a legal system revealed 1,400 years ago? How could you possibly suggest this? This is insane. How could you possibly imagine that it could be applicable today? Why? Because when they look at their own legal systems, the Magna Carta, the Declaration of Rights, the American Constitution, the various documents that have been produced, in the last 500 years, less than 500 years, 200 years. They, though on one hand may contain certain good principles which we can accept today, they also contain grave errors, like that famous error in the American Constitution, Article 1, Section 2, where it was referred to as the 3/5 compromise, right? Where black Americans were to be considered, according to the American Constitution, 1776, put together by the best and most liberated minds of that time. Black Americans were to be considered as 3/5 of white Americans. That is enshrined in the Constitution. You can make your pilgrimage to Washington and go and see it there, written in the document. Right? So this obvious racist, oppressive principle was incorporated in a document which was to guide, the society's life, etc. So they could see that. And if you go to the Magna Carta, you go to the other documents produced in Europe, in France, in Germany, in England, etc., you find many other things. Actually, the American Constitution is way ahead of those others because those are older. So they know to try to apply the legal systems of 200 years ago, much less 500 years ago, is ludicrous. So now when we say not 500 but 1,400 years, they say you must be insane. That legal system must contain so much that is totally inapplicable today. And not only that, it becomes also rigid and inflexible, like societies like the Amish, right, where you have these ancient Christian groups that had developed in Europe, and then they fled persecution in Europe to America, and they arrived there like in the 16th century, and they're still locked into the 16th century. They still drive around in buggies, they don't use electricity, they're still dressing the same way they dressed, all these kind of things. Locked. So that's what they perceive application of the Sharia as being like. Okay, you Muslims, you still want to do all this cover-up thing, praying the same way, going back to the past and being locked into the past. Can't possibly be applicable to modern society. However, we have also fiqh, which provides the flexibility making Islamic law with its inflexible foundation applicable in any place, in any time. And I know personally, in the case of my own father, who I had asked to edit a book which I wrote called The Evolution of Fiqh, of the schools of fiqh, schools of Islamic law, the evolution of fiqh. I asked him to edit it for me because he's an English professor. So he went through it and he edited it. In fact, the last chapter of the book he wrote. My book, Evolution of Fiqh, which is quite detailed, he wrote the last chapter. He's a very good editor. But he said after reading it, he was amazed. He said, I didn't have the slightest inkling that Islamic law was so developed. That this thing really was a complete system, because he was thinking, Islam, like Christianity, you had legal systems, but it was dependent on the existing Roman or Greek systems, and it's just given a Christian coat, right? Whereas the Islamic system had its own unique foundation, and it was so developed as to address all aspects of human need. He was just amazed at it. So this is our point of defense, that Islam is applicable anywhere. The foundational principles found in the Quran and the Sunnah, these address issues which do not change in human life. Human beings are the same human beings they were 1,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago. They were human beings. We don't believe at any time in the past there were monkeys who finally got out of the trees and decided to walk upright. Right? We don't believe that. Human beings were always human beings. And the emotional, psychological, economic, physical needs of human beings have not changed. Yes, society has evolved, so how we meet those needs might change, but the basic needs don't change. So Allah, when He revealed the laws in the Quran and through the Sunnah, He addressed those basic needs which never change. Then the fiqh aspect is for us to deal with those changing aspects of human society and apply Islamic law according to need.